Hello everyone and welcome to iOpenTCGs, the channel where I normally open TCGs, but today we have another discussion video because Star Wars Unlimited just announced their set rotation plans. Now this video is kind of a rant, but I really hope that you listen to it because it's kind of a counter to a lot of the misinformation that I keep seeing on the internet. All right, so set rotation. This is normal, right? Well, let's talk about it. So if you don't know, FFG announced the rotation for Star Wars Unlimited. It's going to start with set 7 in 2026. It's going to rotate in batches of 3. So that means that set 1, set 2, and set 3 will all rotate at the same time when set 4 releases. Now, once rotation starts, there will be an eternal format that anybody can play, of course. But it's important to remember that because rotation happens in batches, that means that the third set of the year will only be legal in the main format, in the premier format, for like 15, 16 months. So for example, set 3 was just released in November of 2024. It will rotate when set 7 releases, which will probably be March 2026. All right, that's like 15, 16 months. All right, that is the announcement. Now, the main thing that this video is about is rotation necessary? Because I keep seeing comments all over the place on Facebook, on Discord, on Reddit from people that I thought knew better. Okay, I know that's kind of an aggressive way to start this statement, but here are some examples. These are not the only comments. Every comment here, I saw like 20 different versions of the same thing. All right, so this comment says that in my opinion, rotation is a normal part of TCGs. Right? Now, they did announce rotation was going to happen when the game came out, so it's not a surprise, but he says rotation is a normal part of TCGs. A lot of upvotes here, seen that a lot. This comment here, rotation is necessary to maintain environments where design can be tailored and addressed. Rotation is necessary. That's another comment, lots of upvotes, cool. Last one here, y'all realize both Magic and Pokemon work the exact same way. All right, in regards to rotation. These are the common sentiments I see over and over and over again, and they are wrong. That is not how the modern TCG market is anymore. So for example, rotation is normal. It is not. For example, let's look at the top TCGs from 2024 on TCG Player. Okay, so these are the most popular games currently right now being sold on TCG Player, which if you don't know, if you're maybe not from America, is the biggest singles site in America. It's a very good representation of what's popular and what's not. All right, and of course, no surprise, we have Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh at the top, but then there are other games, One Piece, Lorcana, Digimon, Star Wars, things like that. Now, of these 10 games, how many do you think have rotation? And again, these are the most popular games right now. Okay, think about it. Only these ones: Magic, Pokemon, Star Wars. Okay, now a lot of Star Wars players, I'm not blaming them. Either Star Wars is their first TCG or they come from Magic. They do not know that the TCG landscape has evolved since Magic the Gathering. Okay, Star Wars is the only other game that has rotation. Now, there are some other games that are still very new. Right? One Piece is, I think, 3 years old. Lorcana is 2 years old, just like Star Wars. Lorcana and Star Wars are very similar in age. Flesh and Blood is 5 years old. Dragon Ball is also very new as well. Okay, so there are new games, but Star Wars is also a new game. All right, they are very comparable to a lot of the other games in here, and none of the other games have rotation. All right, so one more time, no modern popular TCG has rotation. Rotation is not the norm. Okay? Now, the second point. But Magic and Pokemon has it. Yes, they do. But it is a fundamental misunderstanding of Magic and Pokemon to say this. It is wrong. Magic is not the answer. It is not the gotcha that you think it is. Because Magic's main format is Commander. For all intents and purposes, Commander is Magic the Gathering, okay? It is the main format that most people play. It is the main format that new players play. It is Magic the Gathering. It is what's keeping Magic the Gathering afloat. Most Magic the Gathering players believe that. Commander is literally millions and millions and millions and millions of views on YouTube as opposed to any other format. Commander is Magic. Commander does not have rotation. Okay? So what that means is the most popular format for Magic. The format that is continuing Magic success for the last 10 years, 15 years, I don't know. Commander does not have rotation. On the contrary, one of the best things about Commander is the amount of cards you can choose from to make your decks. Okay? It is actually one of its pros that it does not have rotation and it has a lot of cards to choose from. Okay? So, something I'll talk about later is people are like, well, you can't have too many cards available because the new players won't stop playing. Well, guess what? Commander gets new players all the time with an obscene amount of cards available. An absolute obscene amount of cards. Okay? If you think Star Wars, maybe 6 sets is a lot of cards. No. Way more cards available for Commander. Okay? Magic is not a counter to any argument because for all intents and purposes, Magic does not have rotation. Okay? Next up, Pokemon. People say, well, Pokemon has rotation. Pokemon is an absolute anomaly. It is not the rule, it is an anomaly. Why? Because Pokemon's main format is collecting. It is not playing the game. It is collecting. Pokemon is effectively sports cards. Okay? For the majority of people that touch Pokemon cards, it is sports cards. Rotation is meaningless to them. So when you say, well, Pokemon has rotation, that doesn't matter because most people don't play Pokemon. All right. Now, if we go back to that list of games that have rotation, there's only one left, and that is only Star Wars. No other popular game, modern game, has rotation. Why? Because much like mana and getting mana screwed, okay, for Magic, rotation is a relic of the old times. It is not how games work nowadays in the landscape. So what is the alternative? Because I also hear that, well, if it's not for rotation, what could you possibly do? Well, every other game does this. Ban lists and reprints. Ban lists and reprints. Guess what? When Boba Fett was a problem, what did they do? Ban list. Guess what else they do? They reprint things all the time from set 1 to set 2 to set 2 to set 3. Ban lists and reprints is how every other game does it. All of the pros that you're thinking of right now, you're like, oh, well, rotation will help with this. Rotation will help with that. Rotation will help with this. Ban lists and reprints can do all of those things, for the most part, with less cons. Okay? You ban the problem cards and you reprint the important ones. Now, if rotation is necessary to keep the meta vibrant, like I keep saying in comments, well, you can't have too many cards. The meta is going to get stale. How do you deal with that? Well, you ban certain cards like we did with Boba, and you reprint future cards so that new players can get those cards, right? If rotation is necessary to keep a meta vibrant, how come One Piece and Flesh and Blood, which are both the two, I would say, most popular super competitive focused games right now, how come they have a vibrant competitive economy? How come their meta is not super stale? Oh, it's because ban lists and reprint. Now, Flesh and Blood is a unique version of this called the Living Legend system, but it is effectively banning a hero that's doing too well. And all of the cards that work with that hero, if there's another hero that uses those cards, they're free to be used, right? It's the same thing, ban list and reprint, okay? Another common thing I hear is rotation is necessary to keep design space free. If that is true, if you need rotation to keep the design space free, to not get yourself into a hole, why doesn't every other TCG have that issue? All right. Now, designers make mistakes. Flesh and Blood, we've had to ban a lot of cards because they made mistakes. Happens in One Piece, right? There's a big leader that got banned with Boba, right? Like, cards will always have issues, but it's part of the designer's job to be good designers, to be good at their job, to not dig themselves into a hole. And if they do, guess what? You can ban them. Rotation is not needed to keep the design space free for the future. Okay? Now, what you also have to understand, and is that rotation is really just the massive ban list. That is all it is. Instead of a ban list of 10 cards, it is literally a ban list of thousands of cards. That is all rotation really is. It is a sledgehammer, and a ban list, a targeted one, is a scalpel. Okay? Most, if not all, like I said, most, if not all pros of rotation are the same pros as using a targeted ban list. Okay, I keep hearing, well, rotation will help with new players. Rotation will help with this. And I'll get to new players in a second, but all of those things, pros, ban list, good. All right. Sorry, I'm getting a little worked up, but I'm just a little tired of hearing people say the wrong, factually incorrect things. All right. Anyways, we're almost done here. So you can keep the meta fresh by banning problematic cards, right? Banning problematic decks. You can always ban them because, again, rotation is really just a massive ban list. So instead of making that ban list 1,000 cards, you can make that ban list 20 cards, 30 cards, 50 cards, even 100 cards. That's a lot, but let's say that you can do that. You can keep staples cheaper by, of course, targeted reprints that they'll show up in the future. That works as well. Again, people say this will happen in rotation. True. It will also happen if you do ban list targeted reprints, right? You can keep the game from being overwhelming for new players by creating a beginner format rather than the opposite of creating an eternal format. I'll talk more about this in a second with new players, but I think that the idea of an eternal format is fine, but it is the opposite way to go about things, which I'll talk about later on. Now, what's the main difference between rotation and ban lists? Well, the main difference is the cons. Because ban lists hurt the perceived value of cards. Now, I'm not talking about the actual value, okay? I'm not talking about the tendies and you're investing in Star Wars cards and that showcase that you're going to have has become $1 million in 20 years. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking just about the perceived value when you buy a good and you want that good to serve you well for X period of time, okay? Now, perceived value for cards is what makes TCGs work, okay? Otherwise, an LCG, a living card game, would be the most dominant form of card games. Now, FFG has already tried LCGs, and it works for single-player games, does not work for competitive games, because value is a driver in getting people to play the game. Maybe not for you. There's always that person in the comment section that's like, I don't care. I just want the game to be cheap. I want everything to be cheap. Congratulations, you want an LCG. But generally, people want value in the cards that they buy. Maybe not to increase in value, but at least to have value, right? Now, the only group of people who don't care about value, as I said, are those hardcore players that just want to play as cheap as possible. Rotation does help with this, okay? So, not saying that there are not pros for rotation. Full rotation, massive ban list helps when you just want to play the game, buy some cards, get them as cheap as possible. Rotation can help with that, right? But if you want to open boxes, you want value in those cards. If you collect, you want value in those cards. If you are a store, nobody thinks about stores, but if you are a store, you also want value in your boxes. You don't want to buy a bunch of set 3 in hopes that, and not be able to sell it. And then it's, the desirability of a set 3 decreases exponentially compared to, say, a set 1, because as I mentioned, set 3s always rotate much quicker than the first set of the year, right? So generally, if you buy cards, not even buy cards, if you want to buy anything, a PlayStation 5, right? You want it to have value. A good example is Nintendo finally announced Switch 2. Guess what happens? Less people want to buy the Switch 1 right now because Switch 2 is around the corner. That is what happens when you have a rotational system, okay? And again, I'll talk more about that in 1 second. All right? Rotation destroys the perceived value of cards. For example, I buy a bunch of cards. One of the good things about Commander, I've heard this story many times, is maybe you played Commander 3 years ago, you take a break, you come back, 99% of your cards still can be used, still can work. That's a good thing about a non-rotational game. In this game, if you decide to spend some money, maybe you take a break, a year goes by, 2 years go by, you want to get back into the game, 98% of those cards will be useless. That is bad perceived value, all right? When you're deciding to join a new game, that's bad, all right? So let's focus again on new players, because I keep hearing rotation will help new players. Rotation will help new players. It does help in the case that there are fewer cards to learn and they don't have to buy older sets. That is true. But it comes at a cost. Okay? And the cost is perceived value. So for example, let's say you're a new player and you're like, oh my God, I just discovered the game. It just happens to be September or October, right? You want to start playing, but if you want to buy a deck, there's a chance that deck that you want to play, 80% of those cards will rotate in 6 months or less, right? That heavily disincentivizes new players from joining into your game because it becomes a timing play, right? It's like if you can time the game really well, maybe the first set of the year when rotation happens, yes, you might get some new players that come in. It's a great time for them to join in. That's great. But it also means that for the back half of the year, it's a bad time for a new player to join. It is the con of rotation. Whereas if it was targeted ban lists, that's generally not a problem, right? You can join in at any time. Yes, you might have to buy some of the older cards, but as long as there's targeted reprints or things like maybe there's a core set, which by the way, Magic does have a core set, that could also help with helping out new players, right? Or for example, maybe you're a brand new player, you're looking for a TCG to play, you got $200 to spend. There are so many options that you can choose from now, right? Could be Magic, could be probably not Pokemon if you want to play a TCG, but it could be Pokemon, Lorcana, One Piece, whatever, right? Of all of those games, because of the way this rotation happens, Star Wars has the highest chance of that $200 that you spend will be worth the least in a few years. That is just a fact, right? It doesn't mean it will happen, but it has the highest chance that the $200 you spend today is going to be worth the least amount of money in just 2 years, right? That is not good for a new player when they want to join a new game. All right. Now, imagine if it was the opposite way, which is Eternal was the norm. Eternal was the main format. All right. And instead of creating Eternal, right, starting from Premier, going to Eternal, it's the opposite way around. Eternal's the main format, but there's a new player format that has a very strict quote unquote rotation, right? It's saying, hey, only cards from the last 2 years can be used in this new player format. That is the much, much, much better way to go about this because that means new players can join the game. They get all the benefits of quote unquote rotation, and they are free to transition to the main format, the bigger format, once they feel comfortable, right? All the cards that they buy for that new player format is going to still work for the main format, right? That is how it should work because the way it is now is that the main format is going to be rotation, right? Now you can choose to play Eternal later on, but that means Eternal is now the old person's, the old head's format. All right. And that is a much, much different feeling from going from new player format to the regular format for Eternal. I can talk more about that, but I'm trying to go fast. Okay. Now, I know you're probably still not watching, but all of that is to explain, to counter those three original points, right? Rotation is not the normal. Rotation is not needed. There are many other ways to go about it. But let's pretend it is, all of that is wrong, and let's pretend rotation is needed. What is also crazy about this announcement is that this is an incredibly aggressive rotation. So even if you're fine with rotation, you should still have a problem with how aggressive this rotation is. All right? Why? Because, again, I already said how Magic doesn't really have rotation because Commander is the main format. Pokemon, no one cares because they only collect it. But even if, I will grant you that, even compared to Magic and Pokemon, all right, the only other two games that rotate, that are in the top 10, they release sometimes double the amount of sets a year, and both of those games rotate every 3 years in batches instead of 2. Okay? So not only do they rotate in 3 years instead of 2, they also produce way more sets. That is such a fundamental, gigantic difference between Magic and Pokemon and Star Wars. This is an incredibly aggressive form of rotation. All right? It's rotating a lot less sets in a much faster time period. That is wrong. Why would they do that? Well, guess what? Because of greed. All right? If you don't understand that this is pure greed from Asmodee, from the executives, from the shareholders, then I don't know what to tell you, okay? Because rotation is not just for balance. Now, it does have balance pros and cons, right? But there are other pros, and that pro is for the company, okay? That pro is rotation makes you have to buy more boxes if you want to stay in the game, okay? It's saying, buy our new boxes, please buy our new boxes. It doesn't matter that a lot of the old boxes that the retailer's stuck with are worthless. We've already sold those. Buy more boxes, all right? That is part of the problem with this. Not only is it aggressive, it's greedy. You can feel the executives in this rotation announcement, right? You can feel the executives with the Carbonite announcements. And I made a whole nother video about Carbonites, which I'll link somewhere below. In that one, I'm not so angry. I realize now how exasperated I must sound, but that's just because I'm very passionate about people understanding the correct thing. And I've been triggered quite a lot with the comments. All right. So in conclusion, rotation is not the norm anymore. Stop saying it is the norm. It is not the norm. That is not an excuse. Number 2, Magic's main format, even if you want to cite Magic, doesn't even have rotation. That is not even a working point in your favor. Magic, for all intents and purposes, for Commander players, does not have rotation. 3, all the other modern TCGs don't use rotation, which means it is not necessary. They've all figured out how to do it. Now, maybe some of those games will need rotation in the future. Maybe after 4 sets or 4 years of sets, 5 years of sets, 6 years of sets. Maybe. Same can be said with Star Wars, but they're not doing that, right? Now, the one thing I didn't talk about is Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of, again, these old heads, these people who have not played a TCG since the Golden Trio, they look at Yu-Gi-Oh! And they're like, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the prime example of what happens when you don't use rotation. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a problem, okay? But that is not a rotation versus ban list problem. That is a bad developer problem, okay? Because all the other modern games also don't use rotation. They're all thriving. They're all doing very well competitively and in selling as well, okay? Ban lists and reprints is a better option with very similar pros and with less cons. It is the format most games use. And even if you think rotation is a good thing, okay, even if you still should be able to recognize that this is aggressive with only 2 years, with the third set of the year only being legal for 15 months. And it's also the greedy version. The only reason it's this aggressive is not for balance, because companies have figured that out. It's not for helping new players, although it does kind of help with that. It is also for money. Asmodee wants your money. All right. And that is what this last point is. If you can't see that the executives are making the decisions here, they're saying, look at Magic, look at Magic, look at Magic, look at Magic. You're just not paying attention. All right. And that greed can destroy games, as it has destroyed many games already in the TCG space. All right. I feel like I didn't take a break for that whole thing. I hope you made it to the end. I really, really hope that, I originally didn't want this to be too judgy, but once I clicked the record button, I felt myself just getting heated, because over and over again, I'm seeing these points regurgitated over and over again. And now here's the thing. Even if, obviously, I prefer ban lists and reprints over rotation. But I still think almost all of the points here can be agnostic, right? It's just countering the common sentiments that I keep saying. And I hope you can too. All right. I do see some good comments out there that are trying to make these points that are totally ignored, but share this video if you can. Let me know what you think. And I'm going to take a big breath and drink some water after this. All right. We'll be back to opening boxes sometime soon. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.